Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Bill of Rights. I'm going to go through some of these kind of quickly. So again, if you've got questions, send them in an email to me. I'm at a conference, so I can get back to you if I see it. If I'm around my computer, let me know. Hopefully this goes pretty smoothly. Okay, so this notes is posted on my website. If you go on to it, you can take a look. There's a really cool video about the Bill of Rights from TED Ed. Hip Hughes does a specific case. New Jersey versus TLO is a school case. Might be something you'd be interested in. So, what is the Bill of Rights? It's the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. It was put in place after the Constitution was ratified. It was put in 2 years after the Constitution went into effect. And its main purpose here is to give you protections for individual freedoms. So, what are you allowed to do? What is the Constitution letting you do? Is the big issue here. And remember that this comes out of an anti-federalist campaign to say, hey, we'd be happy to, approve this Constitution except for the fact that it doesn't do anything for individuals. And so the Federalists say, okay, we get it. We'll put the Bill of Rights in if you pass this Constitution. So, First Amendment, lots of these should be pretty recognizable to you. First Amendment provides for freedom of religion, speech, press, and assembly. This is the idea that the government can't impede on your freedoms to do some of these things, as well as, especially in religion, the government can't officially endorse any one religion. Now, lots of people will say, yes, they do, because there is a national holiday for Christmas and not, Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or things like that. But officially, they don't recognize a specific holiday or religion. I'm sorry. Second Amendment, please make sure that you write this down as it says on this slide, because this is one of the biggest misconceptions in American government. People always say, oh, the Second Amendment's my right to bear arms. It is, except for the fact that there's a little piece at the beginning that's pretty important. It asserts the need for a militia or a military and protects the right to keep and bear arms. And what they're really talking about here is their right to bear arms to form a militia. That's the original intent by the founders, is that at this point our military is very new, and so there's this idea that you should be able to have arms in case we needed you to defend yourself with other people, not necessarily just yourself. Be careful about this, because lots of Second Amendment debates are centered around this idea of, should I have a weapon in my home? If my idea is so that I could band together with my neighbors should someone attack, yes, that is definitely in the Constitution. What comes into more debate is whether me just having it, or me just carrying it around by myself, or me firing it by myself, is that what the founders had intended? Now, we don't know what the founders intended completely, because we don't have any of them around anymore. So it's up for debate. But remember that you have that militia piece. In my class, I just want you to make sure that you know that. Third Amendment prevents soldiers from taking over your private homes during peacetime or war unless authorized to do so. This is definitely dating the Bill of Rights, because in 1789, when the Bill of Rights is drafted, it is a big deal. They have just had to quarter British soldiers during the Revolutionary War. The colonists were really unhappy about that. They also had to quarter other soldiers, and so there was this question about whether that would be constitutional. Now, we don't use it very often anymore because we have a vast military base system. However, it will come into play when law enforcement need to, have some sort of advantage. Sometimes they will ask to take over your home. Maybe a neighbor down the street, there's a confrontation, or they need to set up, a stable communications area, something like that we often see. Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. This is the idea of what is private. Can someone walk into your home and look through your things? As of right now, that would be unconstitutional. Law enforcement needs to have an issued warrant signed by a judge to basically intentionally come in. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this. If there is public danger, if there's something happening very quickly that the law enforcement believes is important to figure out, they may be able to go ahead and do that. We have a plain sight doctrine, meaning that if a police officer sees something in sight through a window out in public, they have the right to go ahead and search. That also has been sort of deemed smells, sounds, smells, sights. The New Jersey versus TLO talks about that a little bit. Now, the biggest thing I always get when we talk about the Fourth Amendment, I always have a student who raises their hand and says, what about my locker? What about my backpack? What about my cell phone? When you walk into a school building, we know that there are some things that schools can do. Number one, the lockers are owned by that school building, meaning that that locker is school property. They may go into that at any given time. Your backpack is a little different. If they feel that there is a danger, if they feel like there is a weapon in your backpack, if there has been clear evidence that there is something going on, they may be able to do that. With your cell phone, if they have someone who says, you know, I received this text message, they have proper evidence, they can go ahead and often take a look at things. Remember what you post on social media. Just because it's your Facebook page, it's owned by a company. That means law enforcement, employers, neighbors, community members can all get on your Facebook. They can all report the things you put on your social media. I guess you guys are Twitter, not so much Facebook anymore, but it's something that people often don't always understand. Things on the internet are not owned by you often, unless you've created your own server. Fifth Amendment protects the rights to accused persons. This is a lot of things, but primarily it's the idea that you don't have to self-incriminate. If you've ever seen on TV, I plead the fifth. If you actually did something, and if you get up on the stand and someone asks you a question and you don't want to answer it, you don't have to answer it if it's going to incriminate, if it's going to actually confess your crime. It does allow you to plead the fifth. However, pleading the fifth often makes you sound or feel more guilty than before. Sixth Amendment provides the right to a speedy and fair trial. This is the idea that you can have a lawyer. It's the idea that there is a process. You aren't arrested tomorrow and put on trial the next day. It allows for people to have time to gather evidence. It has all of those things. It is the way that evidence is produced. It's the way that juries are selected. A lot of things are within the Sixth Amendment. It's a very important amendment to have. I know I'm going through these quickly, so if you have to, stop back, go ahead and do that. You're going to get a chance to go look at those amendments today in your in-class activity, so you get some more time to really look at what the amendment says. Seventh Amendment is the right to a trial by jury in civil suits. Essentially, it's this right by jury. You can have a group of people decide your fate. You could also have a group of people decide your fate in civil court, and when we get into the court system, you'll sort of get to see what that looks like. It's the idea of a dispute among people. We often don't see juries in civil suits, but it is a possibility, and it's an amendment right that you have. Eighth Amendment prohibits excessive bail and fines and prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. If I'm arrested for stealing a pack of gum, my bail isn't going to be set at $1 million. It'll be set at something that kind of corresponds to the crime. It prohibits that from happening. And then cruel and unusual punishment. This is where we see things like discussions over the death penalty. Some believe this is cruel and unusual punishment. When we talk about torture, when we talk about interrogation techniques, all of those things get put into cruel and unusual punishment. It can even be things like, whether, the sentence that you received is fitting to the crime that you caused, things like that. So a lot of debate within the Eighth Amendment, a very big debate here. Okay, the Ninth and 10th Amendments are very difficult because they're sort of the wrap-up piece. This protects people's rights that aren't specifically listed in the Constitution. Basically, it's this idea that if it's not specifically listed in the Constitution, but it's something that you as an individual desire, you could often claim the Ninth Amendment. Now, the thing is, the Ninth Amendment is a little too vague, and so it's very difficult to understand because there are things that we, just have to do as a community. There are rights that you often just don't have, and so it's pretty hard to use the Ninth Amendment as a specific constitutional defense. And then the last is the 10th Amendment, and this is actually a pretty important amendment. It grants to the states and to the people powers that are not specifically granted in the Constitution. So anything that's not specifically put into the Constitution automatically goes to the states. If the Constitution didn't specifically say how to, that the national government should, regulate boat registrations. Okay, boat registrations goes to the state government. It's sort of this idea that if it isn't specified in the Constitution, it goes to the states. And this is a big deal because remember that the Anti-Federalists are a big proponent of states' rights. They want rights within the states. They don't want an overpowering national government. This is the tip of the hat from the Federalists saying, yep, we got it. Here you go. 10th Amendment, anything not in the Constitution can go to the states. This becomes a pretty big issue, especially when we have, current things. One of the biggest things here is same-sex marriage. A few years ago, it became a debate about should the national government handle same-sex marriage, should states, and the states said, hey, we've got a 10th Amendment. There's nothing outlined in the Constitution about deciding what is a legal marriage, and so the states should be able to decide that state by state. And for a very long time it did. However, we start to see the Supreme Court get involved and the national government get involved when we see civil liberties be impeded. Basically, the other rights that you have, if things are impeded. We also see problems when states aren't recognizing marriages from other states. And that's kind of a bigger discussion in government, but it is an example of something that would have happened, or that has happened, involving the 10th Amendment. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about amending the Constitution. This is important to know. The anatomy of the Constitution packet that you have does a good job at explaining this. So I would hold on to that anatomy of the Constitution packet and use it to study. Don't forget that the test is on Wednesday. Okay, so how do we amend the Constitution? It's all detailed in Article 5 of the Constitution. The founders understood that there were going to need to be additions and edits, and so they put that right into place when they wrote the Constitution. It's designed that an amendment is going to be much harder to enact than a regular law. Be careful here. The laws that Congress passes are not amendments to the Constitution. They are simply laws that are governing our country. Amendments are things that are changing the fundamental structure of our government. They're much bigger deals, so keep that in mind. There are two ways to propose an amendment. There are two ways to ratify an amendment. You can do either one. We'll kind of talk about that process. So, amending starts with, hold on, let me get this slide to work. There we go. With proposals. So how do we propose an amendment? First, it may be proposed in Congress. All amendments to the Constitution so far have been done this way. It's 2/3 of both the House and the Senate must approve an amendment before it can be sent to the states. The second, which I think my video is covering that up a little bit, I apologize, is that it may also be proposed by a national convention that's called by Congress at the request of at least 2/3 of the state legislatures. So if 2/3 of the states are saying, hey, we got to get together on this, we got to figure out if we're going to add something to the Constitution, that's how we can propose an amendment. This has never happened. The second option out of the 17 other times we've amended the Constitution has never been called for. We've always used Congress, and really that's just the easiness of it. Congress is in session a lot. We can put, amendments into their schedules. It often happens pretty quickly. Okay, so we've proposed an amendment. It's been accepted. Now we have to figure out how to ratify it. Remember that ratify means approve. So how are we going to take this amendment that's been proposed? How are we going to approve it? So we do that with the legislatures or with the states. There are two options here. Number one, the legislatures in at least 3/4 of the states must approve the amendment before it becomes a part of the Constitution. So 3/4 of the states have to approve it in their own governments. And number two, it requires approval for special conventions of at least 3/4 of the states. So we can bring states together in sort of a convention style and make a quick decision. This is a quicker way of doing things, but it takes a lot more planning. We've seen a lot of amendments go through the state legislatures, state by state. It's just a little bit, simpler of a system. So those are the two processes for proposing and ratifying. I'm going to close this video, and then I'm going to have the sub show you another quick video to talk about the rest of the amendments. I know there's a lot of notes here. I apologize. we'll get it done, we'll get it taken care of, and then you'll be all set for the test on Wednesday.